Hello, this is Courtney with C. Clark Creative. Thanks for joining me today. I'm using some Distress Spray stains and doing some ink smooshing today, which produces some super cute cards, among my favorites for sure. I'm also using some more goodies from the Stamptember release from Says Stamp. So here I have the Deco Squares background stamp, and I love this geometric design. I'm stamping it onto some Canson watercolor paper. I buy the 9x12 and cut it into 4 panels, so I have oversized panels, but I like that because then I can select which area I like the best. So I get this onto my Misti by placing the stamp first and then my card panel upside down over the stamp, putting some repositionable adhesive on the back, and then closing the Misti backwards, essentially the base onto the front, and then flipping the whole thing over. That way I just get an alignment that I like with the background stamp, and that's generally how I will get my card panel and stamp when I'm using a background stamp. So I run my anti-static pouch over the panel, stamp a few times with VersaMark, and then put some Ranger white embossing powder on, and then set with my Ranger heat tool. I'm doing 2 panels with this background, and then I will have a third panel that I'm going to put some sentiments on in a few minutes, and then a fourth panel that just is completely plain, so that I will be working with pairs. That's generally how I like to do ink smooshing, is working in pairs, 2 panels at a time. So here I'm using the Simons & Stamp I Am With You stamp set, and this has some awesome sentiments. So I have Love You Fiercely, and then the other one is You're Incredible, are the 2 sentiments I chose today. And then I heat emboss those with Ranger Copper embossing powder. So again, I use my anti-static pouch, stamp a few times with VersaMark because this is watercolor paper, and though I am stamping on the smoother side of the paper, it is still a rougher texture, so a few stamps generally would get you decent results. And then before I heat set this, I'm taking a paintbrush. You can't really see on the video, but there are little speckles on the paper, and I tend to do this with sentiments just because there's usually a few here and there. Brush them off with a small paintbrush, or you can even use an electric eraser after the fact, and that will get some of that embossing off as well. So, or even a textured eraser. But moving on to the ink smooshing portion. So I have a distress sprayer there filled with water. I did not end up using that at all, but I like to have it around just in case I am going to want it. The spray stains I'm using today are Milled Lavender, Tattered Rose, and Tea Dye. They're very, very soft colors, especially the lavender. And that tea rose, it looks stronger when it comes out, but it does dry quite a bit lighter. So what I'm doing is I spray some on, I smoosh the panels together, open them up. Sometimes I'll tap them just to get that water or the ink to move around a little bit. I will hit it a few minutes at a time with my Ranger Heat It tool, but I'm not keeping the heat on there very long just because I don't want that embossing powder to be reactivated and lose or get some distortion on my embossing. So I just kind of add color, move things around, let them dry a little bit, continually cleaning up just to keep a little bit of a cleaner workspace, and just keep moving those panels around until I think it's to a point I like. I generally will not dab off too much, just because if you dab with a paper towel or something, it's going to take a lot of that color off. So a lot of this is just kind of letting it set while it's drying a little bit. So I start with those 2 panels, I set them aside, and then I come back to do my other 2 panels, the sentiment panel and then just my plain panel. Now this time I do not use the tea dye. I wanted a little bit lighter coloring between the 2. You almost don't even notice that there's no tea dye on this panel just because 2 out of the 3 colors are still used, so they match together very well. You'll see here I was doing a little bit different technique, which does give you a little bit different results, where I'm spraying onto my workspace and then dipping the paper into that spray and then taking the 2 panels and smooshing them. And that does give you a little bit different look. Not a huge difference. The main difference is from using the embossing to kind of do an emboss resist and just having a mainly flat panel. So once those panels are dried, or mostly dried, you can see the Deco Squares is still a little wet, but not too bad. It looks quite a bit more shiny than it felt, and it ended up die cutting just fine. But I've got the Sizzix dotted ovals and dotted squares. You can use any, I don't think these dies are available on the market anymore, so you can use any oval and square die. I like the edging to be the same for a card like this, but I don't always have my die cut edgings match, so use what you've got as always. But I've got 2 sizes of ovals, and then I have a square, and then these other 2 panels are just going to be my background panels. So I will trim those to an A2 card size panel, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I trimmed both these down. And then it's time to start putting these cards together. For such a simple design or layout design, these cards are absolutely gorgeous. And it's just essentially allowing the distress spray stain to show its beauty, and that's the focal point of the cards. You don't need a lot of extra anything on these cards. So the base panel, I'm just putting straight down onto the card base, and then I pop up that sentiment with some Scotch foam tape. And then on the second panel, fairly similar, that back panel is straight onto the card base. The square panel and the sentiment oval are both popped up using Scotch foam tape. And with that, these 2 cards are complete. Super simple to make, but absolutely gorgeous. And like I said earlier, out of all the cards I've done, these are among my favorites because they're just so pretty. This color palette, the milled lavender, the tattered rose, and the tea dye just look amazing together. And along with a little bit of that emboss resist, and then pairing that up with a panel where it's just the ink straight on the paper, it just creates a bit of interest without being too much. So with that being said, check out these products from Says Stamp. I know a lot of their Stamptember release has been sold out, but it is restocking the beginning of October, maybe a week or so more on some of those products. But awesome products, super happy with the whole release. I wanted to get everything. But with what I was able to pick up, I've been super happy with. So thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon, and enjoy.